We're talking to Wayne Barrett on this edition of City and State. I'm Gerson Borrero. We're going to continue to dialogue with this phenomena, political phenomena that we see clearly on his way to re-election for a second term. Wayne Barrett, you mentioned the media strategy, how he deals with the media. Is Andrew afraid to engage in just regular conversation that will be misinterpreted? Like, for example, the holding of the coat that he said that Governor Pataki was doing for then Mayor Rudy Giuliani under a very stressful world condition, and especially in New York City at the height of 9/11 and how disconcerting it was and how we didn't know what was going to happen. Is that he's afraid that he will be able to speak truthfully, honestly? Is that why he does all these conversations off the record and he'll call reporters up, certain reporters that are privileged to hear him? Is he that afraid to tell the truth, or is it that he wants to be able to put it in that way? I'm trying to get to...
I don't think he's afraid of it at all, but if the way he's doing it works, why change it? I think is the way he thinks.
You mean to say there's a possibility that he could change if he sees that it's...
Yes, I do think that's... If it's not working, first of all, he's extraordinarily verbal, okay? He's extraordinarily funny. Very funny guy.
Andrew Cuomo has a sense of humor?
He'll pull tricks. He's pulled tricks on me on the phone. He can disguise his voice. He can tell tales that are... unbelievable, and he's extremely funny.
Give me an example of a phone prank.
Well, I can't go into private conversations.
Okay, true, okay.
I can't do that.
Okay,
but
you have gotten phone calls.
I've gotten phone calls where he pretends to be other people. It takes me 10 minutes to guess. I can tell you one thing that is sort of the history of it. Mario, when he was governor, called the house here one night looking for me. My wife answers the phone. His oldest daughter was about to get married. So he winds up engaged with my very wise wife in an hour-long conversation about the marriage of his daughter, right? And so at the end of the conversation, Mario says to Fran, I know you know that I've given up the practice of law as governor, but if you ever need a divorce attorney, I'll be happy to represent you, right? So...
And obviously Fran didn't abandon you.
Yes. So years later, this joke goes on for let's hope it's a joke, 45 years of marriage. But, this joke goes on for years. And then when Andrew gets elected Attorney General, he calls the House. And he says, Fran, I just want you to know I've taken over your case from my father, and I have subpoena power.
You certainly have gone after both Mario Cuomo when he deserved it, and certainly examined Andrew Cuomo extensively. I think that there isn't a better piece that when he was running for Attorney General. And when you did the Mark Green loved the piece, Andrew Cuomo still hates it and wish he could eliminate it. And it had to do with what he did as housing czar and his what he had to do with the meltdown of the financial system that caused a lot of people to use it. Is that the worst policy decision that you can point to that Andrew Cuomo has done in terms of being part of what happened with that the policies that were adopted that led a lot of people that weren't eligible to be able to get loans that they couldn't support then, and to be able is that the worst that
This was a policy that flowed out of the White House, as I pointed out in that piece.
Right.
Both President Clinton and Bush were part of this, and I'm talking about George W., not George H.W. Both. This was one of the very few things that Republicans and Democrats had in common, which is that they thought they were helping, or at least they posed as helping minorities, people who couldn't afford homes, by making the terms of mortgage loans so accessible to working class families. But in fact, the families couldn't sustain those mortgage payments, and it was really just a boon to the banks. And so yes, I was highly critical of that. Now, I am highly critical right now of his alliance with the Senate Republicans. I think it costs him. You can't if you've got any kind of national ambitions, and frankly, as often as I talk to him, as much as I know him, I don't know if he has any national ambitions. He's never shared that with me. And I say to him, assume you do, you know.
Right.
And I assume he does. His father, of course, never ran. But his father had an alliance with the Senate Republicans when he was the governor. But it was understandable in those days because there was no way a Democratic majority was going to get elected to control the New York State Senate. Today, there is a Democratic majority in the New York State Senate, and Andrew chooses to deal with this configuration of what they call independent Democrats.
How do you feel about that? Have you ever seen anything in your lifetime that when a person like Jeff Klein does pull something like this and he gets away with a powerful governor like that? So is there a wink from the governor here?
I think there's much more than a wink. I think this is an alliance that Andrew has facilitated. And I think, if you let Dean Skelos, the head of the Republican conference in Albany, if you let him define what kind of a Democrat you are and you have national ambitions, I think you're in trouble when you go out and run among liberal Iowa Democrats or liberal New Hampshire Democrats, and you've got to sell a record, the record that Dean Skelos and Jeff Klein allowed you to have. I think he still has a good record. As I said, I think he's achieved a tremendous amount as governor, but he's got to explain why he was unable to do anything about the DREAM Act, why he was unable to do anything about the Women's Equality Act. He's got to explain why it is that he got tremendous coverage in the New York Times, an editorial in the New York Times endorsing his prison education program, and then the Republicans wouldn't let him have $1 for prison education because they said, well, we don't want prisoners to get a college degree. Our constituents have to go out and pay to send their children to college. I mean, the most ridiculous arguments in the world. And he couldn't get a nickel through his budget to fund this prison education. Well, that's because Dean Skelos is defining his record. And I think it's a very unfortunate alliance.
Will that happen if, as expected, Andrew Cuomo is reelected into a second term? Will he continue to have this kind of working relationship at a minimum, or the dictatorial preferences of the minority, which is Republican right now, and individuals in the Democratic Party like Jeff Klein, the senator?
So far he hasn't in any way indicated he's in a re-election year now. We'll see. He has the choice before him of actually supporting the election of a working Democratic majority. He hasn't indicated in any way that he'll do that. If he doesn't do it, when Hillary Clinton is at the head of the national ticket in 2016, does anybody think that the Republicans are going to come through that race with a majority? So is he going to let Hillary Clinton be the one who changes the politics of New York when he could change it himself by supporting his own party? If you look at, I looked at it repeatedly. Mm-hmm. I haven't looked at it recently, but I'm sure it's the same. If you look at the website of the New York State Democratic Party, which he completely controls, they never mention Senate Democrats. It's as if they're invisible people.
Exactly. They're almost like Latinos for him. And I go to the DREAM Act. You mentioned the DREAM Act before. I'm glad you brought it up. He could have taken charges. He could have taken the lead. I don't fault him completely. I'll tell you, as a Puerto Rican, I'm somewhat disappointed in the lack of Latino leadership that in the person of Assemblyman Francisco Moya and Senator Jose Peralta, who actually talked a good game, but really didn't step up or have a plan. There isn't, and I can't fault them either. There isn't a pipeline. And I know that they had a meeting with the governor and he gave them a way out. I don't think they were well prepared to mobilize their community. Others will disagree. Do you think that it's possible that Andrew Cuomo actually saw that there wasn't a way legitimately that he couldn't pass the DREAM Act? And also from there to what he did at the convention, there was some talk, serious talk, that he may in fact select a Latino as a running mate. 3.4 million people in New York State happen to be Latinos. That's at a minimum out of 19.5 million people in New York State. Why does he snub us? Was it that important that he select somebody from Western New York and somebody like a Kathy Hochul, who's already an anti-immigrant conservative Democrat? So go with the DREAM Act. What do you think? That is it really his fault, or is it the fact that we don't have the strong leadership in the Latino in the Latinos in the Senate and the Assembly?
Well, the two questions: Hochul's selection and Dream Act. On the Dream Act, I think it's been an underreported story, and certainly, I haven't learned anything different from what you've read and observed, really, which is we don't understand why it couldn't get the votes. Jeff Klein actually went on the floor and made this impassioned speech about his own immigrant background and all this. They rush the bill when they don't have the votes lined up. They rush the bill to a vote. It was clearly some kind of an orchestrated defeat. But what the governor's role was in the orchestration of that defeat has never been clear. It's not clear to me. Jeff Klein,
I can't figure it out either.
Yeah, Jeff Klein, obviously had to be part of this. Here he is, a state senator from Westchester, the Bronx. He certainly, should be representing Latinos in on this question. And he said all the right things, and yet he and his allies managed to defeat a bill by, I think, one vote, right?
Right.
And now, when you look at the Hochul situation, this is the second time, because when he ran in 2010, Andrew actively considered running with a Latino. He is certainly not the only one. Let's put this in historical perspective,
Correct.
okay? Until the election of Melissa Viverito, we have never had a Latino who had any political power in the city or the state.
And that wasn't exactly, and it was a selection process by politicians, where
Right.
clearly you're indicating the association
Right.
that he could have done, pick this person out, who then the voters will have a chance, which would really give a prominence to this
Yeah.
person.
Yes, and of course, lieutenant governors, as Mario Cuomo was, can become governors. So this could be a stepping stone to a real position of power, which the Latin community certainly is entitled to and has been discriminated against in the electoral politics of New York in an extraordinary way. The fact is, it's inexplicable. It's inexplicable that we've never had a Latino Archbishop of New York. It's inexplicable because Latinos are half the church in New York, right? And yet this is the history, and it's so Andrew is part of this history. Why he makes this choice, I've said he has a great tactical mind. I assume he has seen numbers, poll numbers that show he's put $1 billion into the Buffalo area of state funding. It's been enormous. He lost Buffalo in 2010 and 2010. He wants to win the Buffalo area, the Erie County area this time. And I assume he's looked at numbers, weighed the whole thing, and thinks he will win in Buffalo. His way of thinking is, it's like the Yankees and the Red Sox. They want
You had to go there, didn't you? You had to stick that one in.
They want to take away Jacoby Ellsbury from the Red Sox as much as they want to add him to their own lineup. So what he does, Andrew's mind, is what can I take away from the other side? Well, Erie County is a Republican stronghold. He thinks that in Erie County, with the moves he's made, with all the great state subsidies, and now pulling somebody from that area, that he's going to carry this region. And it's a twofer for him because he's taking a vote away from the other side. And I assume that's what tempted him to do this. I do think it does suggest that he doesn't have real operative national ambitions.
By not selecting a Latino?
By not selecting a Latino. Because it just doesn't make any sense. It happened at the very same time that the president was naming Castro the housing commissioner, and everyone was saying he's a real possible vice presidential candidate at a national level.
Right.
And certainly the emphasis on the Latino vote has been extraordinary.
Right.
So I think, I think that the selection here suggested he's thinking in very parochial terms, not in cosmic terms,
or is it
not in presidential terms.
Is it a possibility that he's already just gotten off the tarmac, left the tarmac like his father did when he was called, and he said 2016 is out of the question. I'm going to be governor for another 4 years. I'm still young enough. He is leaving the Cuomo stamp on so many projects of construction not only in Buffalo and West New York, but also Tappan Zee Bridge as an example. These are Cuomo imprints on the state. Does he want another 4 years of that? And can we assume that 2016 is out of the question? Because I mean, clearly.
Oh, I think 2016 is out of the question unless something dramatic happens with Hillary. But I just think that this is one of those few times when you see who he picks as lieutenant governor where you can see that he thinks it's out of the question. This would not be, if he thought there was a chance he could run for president in 2016. Not that it's a great revelation that she's going to run and she's going to be the nominee, but, it would be nice even if he was thinking about 2020 to have solidified his, by 2020, the Latino vote is even going to be larger nationally. It's going to be far more important than it is today. So if he was thinking in net presidential terms, this would have been a time.
Bad calculation.
Yeah, this would have been a time. So I think he's thinking very much now. I think he loves being governor. He sat at his father's side. The only time that his father lost an election, after the 82 election, he lost before that when he ran for mayor. But after he was elected governor, the only time he lost was in '94 when Andrew was down in Washington and couldn't run the operation. Andrew ran the operation. And the Governor Cuomo, Mario Cuomo, has said that himself.
Right.
That he missed Andrew tremendously in the '94 campaign.
Well, is it possible then, if we take the national political equation out of this, what can we expect during the course of the election that Andrew, if Astorino, don't laugh, if Republicans get their act together, that he can force? Does Andrew have to be forced into anything by Astorino, or is Astorino just a figurehead that is going to get clobbered by the Democratic Party and what Andrew's putting together?
Look, every poll shows he's up by 30 points, but every poll also shows that if there's a Working Families Party candidate, and we don't know whether there will or won't be, it's a much closer race.
Is it really important that the and what are the shenanigans going on? The Independence Party, we saw what happened. Is this what he must do, or is it necessary for him to entertain the Working Families Party, who has dubious, in certain circles in the state, has dubious credibility, the Independence Party also. So does he need any of this, and why is he even giving legitimacy to these groups? Does a sitting governor really that as powerful as Andrew Cuomo need this? Is it the right thing for a Democrat, a real Democrat like Andrew Cuomo is to do?
Well, it's a ballot line,
right?
Okay. And we have this unusual thing in this state. I think it's a precious thing, where we have these parties that are not the two main parties. The Working Families Party stands for something. The Independence Party stands for nothing. So I wouldn't lump the two together in any way. But the Working Families Party stands for something, and it is a union-dominated but progressive party on most questions. Now, one of their big critiques of him is he's for charter schools. Well, have they noticed that the president who runs on their line is for charter schools? Have they noticed how many Democrats across the United States are for charter schools? So lots of Democrats are for charter schools. It's hardly a basis to not endorse them. And then they say, well, but he didn't extend the millionaire's tax, but he put in a better system. We've got a better state tax code than we had when he became governor. So some of the left critique is really false. Some of the WFP critique of Andrew is really false. Some of it is on target, but some of it is really false. And so I think, but he has to deal with them because they have a ballot line. And every poll shows that if they run somebody, an unnamed person, on that ballot line, it's going to take a lot of votes away from Andrew and narrow the race. It's not going to beat him. And I don't see why he worries about margins. Every politician does. We saw what happened to Chris Christie. He was so worried about running up the score that he's, look what kind of problems he has trying to run up the score. Nobody ever remembers the score except the guy who got it. Right. Rudy tried in '97 in that election. I got to run up the score. I got to get the biggest margin ever gotten. No one notices. No one even remembers.
Unless they bring it out in the releases and part of the...
I mean, look at the guy. If he's going to run for president, it's going to be in 2020. Do you think anybody's going to remember what score he got in 2014? They'll remember he got reelected. But I mean, it's a ridiculous goal. It's to govern for a marginal difference of 2 points here or 3 points there. To me, it's far more significant if he selects a Latino as lieutenant governor, if he's thinking national, than whether or not he wins by 25 points or 28 points. But that's not the way politicians view it. It's not just Andrew who's been bitten by that bug, but it's a sick bug as far as I'm concerned.
In the case of Andrew, and I know there are many other questions, but I appreciate the time you've given it. Wayne Barrett is certainly not only politics, but you do know this politician better than most. And I expect for you to consider a book on Andrew Cuomo, because it will probably make him lose sleep and have nightmares while you're working on it. And I know that for a fact. What would be the one thing that you can say that Andrew Cuomo can now do this day to actually perfect or better what's remaining in the next 4 years? Is there anything that he needs to tweak? Is it the fact that he talks to himself and only listens to himself? There's very few people, for example, that knew whose lieutenant governor pick was. As I understand it, might have been Kathy Hochul and probably Joe Percoco, very in tight, and people didn't find out around him till after 40 minutes prior to the announcement, and those, when people came in to shoot the video of them together. This is the stories that are coming out. I don't know if in fact they're true, because I haven't had a conversation actually that anybody will even own up to the fact how they scripted this. Does he have to stop being his best political advisor? He certainly was a good political sounding board for his father. Who does he get? Andrew Cuomo talks to himself. Is that good for a politician?
Well, I want to say one thing. He is one of the best listeners I've ever known in my life.
When he engages with people.
When he talks to people, sometimes he's so silent on the other end of the phone, I wonder if he's listening. So I'll throw something out, and he'll remember exactly what I had said 10 minutes earlier. He is a tremendous listener, okay? And he has a tremendously open mind for input. Now, what happens after he inputs it? He slides it into his own value system. He slides it into his own frame of reference at that point in time, and he filters out what he doesn't want, but he listens to it. He definitely listens to voices. And but the one thing that he has to do, I drive him crazy when I tell him my favorite governor was Eliot Spitzer.
Not a good relationship.
Yes. And I tell him that because Eliot Spitzer had the balls to take on the Republican majority in the Senate. Now, why is that important? Am I just a partisan? I am a partisan. I'm a Democrat. I'm a liberal Democrat. But that's not the explanation. 1966, I was around in those days. In 1966, the Democrats held the majority in the Senate for 1 year, right? Then in 2008, they elect a majority again that turns into the disaster that you and I covered with Pedro and all the boys.
Pedro, Hiram Montserrat, Carl Kruger, and Ruben Diaz.
Yes, it turns into the disaster that it turned into. So they were in control for 2 years. We do not know what kind of a state we could have, how progressive it could be if we had a Democratic governor, a Democratic assembly, and a Democratic state senate. Let's give it a shot. We're talking about my entire adult lifetime. We have not had this opportunity to see what kind of politics we could have in New York without a Republican Senate being the filter for everything that happens. And so, to me, the biggest change, if you say I'm going to Albany to clean up Albany, to me it means that one of the things you're going to do, not that I think Shelley Silver and the gang in the assembly are anything to write home about. I think Shelley Silver is a disgrace. But to me, the one thing you can do to change the power dynamics of Albany and actually see if we can produce some progressive change beyond what Andrew has achieved is to give the Senate a shot at a Democratic majority, which he's the head of the Democratic Party in the state of New York. That it shouldn't require any persuasion. But that's the thing he could do. And we could see, I think, a big change in a second term in terms of what he's able to get done. It'll be a no excuses second term. You either deliver or you don't deliver. But I think it could be a very interesting time in the politics of this state.
Well, this conversation didn't happen over the phone. It happened on City and State TV. We're going to have thousands of viewers and probably thousands more that actually are going to see this. And Andrew, it's in your court. Let's give it a shot. Are you going to listen to Wayne Barrett, or are you going to listen to that person in the mirror that talks to you all the time? I'm Gerson Borrero with the great Wayne Barrett, and giving you a perspective of Andrew Cuomo, our sitting governor, and probably the guy who's going to be governor for another 4 years. And we're going to continue this conversation. Thanks a lot, Wayne. I really appreciate it. I hope that Andrew Cuomo appreciates it also.
Okay.
We'll be back on City and State. Gerson Borrero saying goodbye for now.